calls itself Family Entertainment. And I watched Vince's interview with Bryant Gumbel or whoever he interviewed with, or Bob Costas, and, you know, Vince is a forceful talker, and he's not intimidated by these guys. But, I mean, how could you sit there and buy that garbage about what he was saying that they're doing and ratings-wise and yada, 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 and still then think that what they're promoting, because let me ask you this, do they promote respect for authority?
No, absolutely
Do they promote respect for the opposite gender?
Absolutely not. No, they actually beat up women.
Are they strong about being anti-drug?
Yeah, no. Well, they have a drug policy, but let's see how well that's enforced.
Yes, they have a drug policy. Did you see the last picture of McMahon on some magazine? I'd say he's taking his own stuff, wouldn't you?
I would say so, too.
All right, so the bottom line, I think we've answered that question, that anybody can look at that sport today, and they can see that, first of all, it is definitely against God. Don't they even mock God?
Mm-hmm.
Are they mocking God right now?
With as Jerry Lawler said, they actually just booked God in the match.
Yeah, well, sure. You know, let me say one thing. Everybody will meet God one day, and they'll have to explain their life. And the difference in the way I believe is that Christ will be my advocate. I don't want to be my own advocate when I go in front of God and try to tell him what I have done or why I would deserve to be in heaven. I don't want to face that deal.
Well,
that's how I feel about it.
A lot of people point at wrestling today and say it's just so entertainment-based, but if you go back to your Mid-South and the UWF, a lot of that stuff was getting more towards the sports entertainment. Of course, not to the level or the adult nature of it is now. But do you think that you guys might have been ahead of your time?
Well, I don't know. I know that fans really seem to enjoy what we did, and they certainly still talk about it a lot. And, you know, from the point of personal pride, like I think anybody has to have a certain amount of pride in what they do, or they don't do it well, it's really gratifying to find that people still have such a deep allegiance to what we did, and that they follow it so closely. I think what we did was we created exciting television and exciting wrestling. We were in an area that wasn't very big population-wise, and I was, without a doubt, bottom line, at the very least, the third best promotion in the nation, and maybe percentage-wise the best. So we not only ran a great wrestling operation, we also ran a responsible business operation.
But a lot of people who were in that territory say that it was one of the better places to work because the money was good and the fans seemed to actually appreciate what you guys were doing.
Well, they respected. We you know, one thing we did. You know, as a wrestler, I can't make you change your mind about what you think about wrestling, but I can demand that you respect me. And I think that I always would ask our guys to carry themselves in such a way that they could be respected. And if they did, then that was really a good deal.
Absolutely. Well, we talked a little bit about Vince being on TV and being a promoter, and some people, not to get back to that kind of questions, but some people would say maybe you put yourself on TV too much.
That I did? Me?
Yeah.
Where? In Mid-South?
Yes.
Well, you have to understand that what I did, because I was the one that took myself off of television, and I was always trying to get there. But what I did is that when I started taking over and doing the color commentary, it was for a purpose. The purpose was that I wanted to explain to the fans at home what the wrestler was actually going through when they were out there. And it's something that is totally foreign to them today because they don't ever talk about what's happening in the ring today. That's almost a taboo. They think, see, you've got to understand that what's out there today is a cartoon that's come to life. Whereas it was a different era then. We were saying that it was an athletic endeavor. And so I wanted the fans to emote and understand what the wrestler was feeling. And so who better could describe that than somebody who had wrestled? But my goal was always to get myself out of the ring and to get myself off the television. And so basically speaking, as years went by, I was on TV less and less and less.
When you went to WCW in the early 1990s, some fans say that they were upset with the WCW product because Ric Flair was no longer around, of course.
Well, that didn't have anything to do with that.
Yeah, you weren't involved with that. We know that, yes.
Do you believe that WCW without Flair was as big of a deal as a lot of people seem to think it was?
I don't think any one person would make WCW. I don't think that was their problem at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think their problem was that they'd spent like $30,000, which was a lot of money back then. They'd spent $30,000 on a survey to find out what the fans wanted, and versus NWA wrestling or Vince's wrestling, and the survey came back unanimously saying we don't want what Vince has. We want something completely different. And so they took that study that they'd used that $30,000 to do, and ignored it. And instead they started trying to copy Vince. Well, you're not. I don't care what. Vince is a genius in his own right, so you're certainly not going to out-innovate the innovator of his own system. And so they had no rhyme nor reason, and it was just a financial failure. And and they wouldn't listen to anybody. They had a bunch of people up there that it's like anything else. They always think they know what they're doing. And even if they don't know what they're doing, they're going to say they do just because they'd much rather be in power than to have somebody successful helping them. So that was what would happen at Turner Broadcasting, is that they had just let it go, go crazy, kind of speak, and it had a little direction, and it had and it showed. And so they were losing like $8 million a year then. So when they brought me in, they asked me if I could bring it in at under an $8 million a year loss, and I said, "Good gosh, I hope so." And as a matter of fact, in 11 months, we brought it in at a $400,000 loss, and couldn't even get an accommodation from the boss upstairs because he was in his politics too. So, I always operated everywhere I ran. I believed you had to have a bottom line. I mean, in other words, why be in business if you don't have a bottom line? That's what you're in business for. Mm-hmm. And so I ran every business I was ever in as a business.
Was it your idea to stop the whole jumping off the top rope thing in WCW, or was that something over your head?
It was my idea. Sure, it was my idea.
Why?
Well, how old are you?
Not really. I'm about 18 now. Yeah, that's right.
You're 18 now? 18. Well, I doubt if you would understand what I would say then, but here was your theory of being a villain. If you were going to be a villain, you had to cheat in order to beat the babyface. If you could walk out into the ring and beat the babyface head on, then you ought to be the babyface. Mm-hmm. So when you're jumping off the top rope, there's no heat to it because you're not breaking any rules. So by making it illegal, then if you jump off the top rope without getting caught and beat the babyface, you have gotten what we call heat. And so it was really a good idea.
Perfect sense.
Totally good.
Perfect sense.
Yeah, and it did. And so we were not trying to get away with people doing high-risk maneuvering moves. My gosh, we're not insane. We were strictly going to put it back in the context that the move had to mean something, which, if you look at today, my gosh, they powerbomb women through chairs and stuff, and the girl gets up and walks away. Now, see that? You guys have been retrained to that, so it can never go back the other way.
It can never go back?
No, it can't go back. There's no way. The audience has been retrained into today. I don't think anybody could afford the time that you'd need to retrain the audience, so to speak. But anyway, bottom line is that today nothing means anything. There's not a move out there. You got to realize that even when we changed the world's title to Ron Simmons in Baltimore, which was a very tough market, there were people in the audience crying because we caught them so off balance. They didn't understand. They didn't know what we were going to do. Well, you go to the matches today, you pretty well know who's going to win what. And you certainly know no major title's going to change hands unless it's WrestleMania or something like that. It's ludicrous. So why would you go to Madison Square Garden? Because you're not going to see anything happen. And that's a crying shame because that was the mecca of wrestling. I think you should always have the mecca of wrestling where there's major title changes and stuff. So one thing about when you went to a Mid-South event, you never knew what was going to happen, but you knew one thing, that you weren't going to figure it, and it was going to be exciting, and you were going to have more than your money's worth.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good theory about everything, and actually you mentioned Ron Simmons, and let me warn you, I hate to give you these questions. I'm not a negative person, but I sat down last year on the WWE tour bus with Ron Simmons for about 15 minutes, and first of all, let me tell you that he was pretty well schnockered.
Yeah, I've heard, yeah, he has substance abuse problems.
Well, he was pretty out there when I was doing the interview, and we were doing a little thing we do at the end of some interviews when I said, word of